Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Anyegoro. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, Nigeria's capital Abuja is reported to be on high alert over threats by jihadists to carry out attacks in the capital. Patrols by police are said to be in force, while technical intelligence gathering means have been deployed along with a perimeter cordon around the city. The police, though, have denied that there is any imminent threat and have urged residents to remain calm. It comes as a popular Catholic priest in the southeast, Father Mbaka, who used to be an ally of President Buhari, has called on him to resign over the deteriorating security situation in Nigeria. The presidency has hit back, alleging that the criticism was because the priest failed to get contracts from the government. We'll try to get to the heart of the matter in a moment. And later, philanthropy, global giving, and now the Gates' divorce. Sad news that Bill and Melinda are going their separate ways. So what might have led to this decoupling? How might the split affect the work of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the biggest private philanthropic organizations in the world? And with nearly $150 billion at stake, how might they split their property? Will attempt to enter the Gates' orbit with considered assessment by our correspondent. And later still, an uneasy week for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. His humanity, probity, integrity and credibility have all been called into question, and an official investigation has been launched with potentially legal implications. So how unusual is it for a British Prime Minister to be accused of lying in Parliament, and could it all get a lot worse for Boris Johnson? We have answers from a regular watcher of British political issues coming up. Now, the Nigerian police force has reportedly deployed officers on horses and motorcycles in the capital Abuja, amid reports that jihadists are planning to carry out attacks in the capital. In a widely cited statement, a police spokesperson in Abuja, Mariam Yusuf, said the deployment was meant for intelligence gathering and urged residents to remain calm. She said the patrols are being conducted in line with the peculiarities of every terrain within the capital territory. The team has adopted the use of motorcycles, horses and other technical means of gathering intelligence to checkmate what she called criminality. There are reports that Boko Haram militants have been targeting Abuja, but police said such reports were mischievous and were meant to create tension in the capital. Recently, the governor of neighboring Niger State, Abubakar Sani Bello, said Abuja was not safe after suspected Boko Haram militants took control and hoisted flags in Kaure and Shiroro local government areas of Niger State. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by the security and defense analyst, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, who's also CEO of the security firm Beacon Consulting, and by the national chairman of the Nigerian Inter-Party Advisory Council, Dr. Leonard Ezenwa. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for coming in. I'll come straight to you, Dr. Adamu. The security situation in the northeast, the northwest, and now the southeast becoming increasingly appalling. And now there's talk that Abuja is in the sights of the insurgents and they're planning to carry out attacks on the capital. What are you hearing about that and what's your reaction to it?
Thank you, Charles. So there are different perspectives to this issue. There are what has been termed as fake news, which seem to be increasing in tempo over the last few days. And then there are facts that have also emerged to indicate that perhaps there is an increase in the threat level in Abuja. Now, let me start with the facts. The governor of Niger State did release a statement saying that elements he described as Boko Haram. Now, the word Boko Haram is a very loose word. When I first heard that statement, what came to my mind is it speaking of the Islamic State in West Africa province? Is it speaking of Ansaru or the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah al-Dawat wal-Jihad? All different groups, different methods, and different targeting. Now, I looked into my archives and I was able to trace that Ansaru, which is the third and probably the smaller group, did have active cells in Niger State. Now, was he referring to Ansaru? Unfortunately, we haven't seen any documentary evidence to back the governor's statement.
And there's been no follow-up. I mean, he hasn't made any further statements about that.
Unfortunately. Then we also went further to plot a map to show the distance between the local government he referred to and Abuja. And it was about 213 kilometers precisely from that local government to Abuja.
So that's certainly not 2 hours, is it? Away. I mean,
well, it depends. Someone pointed out to me that there are trails within the forest that could be shorter than that 213 kilometers that I mentioned. But the point I'm trying to make is that perhaps some of the statements need to be taken for what they are, perhaps a bit of politics, and then perhaps to even draw attention to a problem that he feels the federal government should handle in his state. So
basically what you're saying is that there is a greater threat if they were targeting the Shiroro Dam, for example, rather than them, and that there's an element to it that suggests that it is political and trying to get attention in Abuja, which is the seat of power.
Exactly. And then, so that we're understood carefully by viewers, the group that we're discussing, Ansaru, what are they targeting? Who were they after? Mainly foreigners. You recall when the French expert was kidnapped in Katsina. That was the group that was behind that kidnapping. So in 2014, they were very active. 2012, 2013, 2014, very active. And then their leader was killed, I think, in 2016. And then, they went sort of quiet. And since then, they've been trying to regroup. And then on 2 occasions, they released a video, one in Zamfara and the other one in Niger State, suggesting that they had cells in those 2 locations. But in terms of their activities, we've seen a lull in that particular group. So it's really not, there is no fact to back the fact that there is an active threat from that group to Abuja.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for putting it in very clear perspective. This is one of the reasons why I wanted you to come in, because I think it's very important. You know what is going on and you have the background and the analysis as well. And let me bring the national chairman of the Nigerian Inter-Party Advisory Council in, Dr. Leonard Ezenwa, because I'm sure you're close to the pulse of what is happening politically in Nigeria. But let's first of all talk about the police, who have dismissed some of those reports of an imminent attack on Abuja as mischievous reports meant to create tension in the capital. So far, of course, there's been no disturbance. So does it appear to you that the police are right?
Well, I won't say whether the police are right. They are doing their job, and they need to alert the nation of an impending threat, whether it is within Abuja or outside Abuja. One thing is very clear: Nigerians are apprehensive. The environment is not secure for a lot of people, and they are very concerned about it. So anything that will breach security in one form or the other, people are bound to have some concern around it. So for the police to come out to say, look, they are dismissing that, they are doing their job. But it is a different thing entirely for them to dismiss that, and also for the common people or the populace to take that as something that will comfort them. At this time, nobody's comforted because everybody's just on their toes and people are not sleeping with their 2 eyes. So the point basically is for them to find a more creative ways of engaging the populace and also building some level of confidence on how to relate with them and to share intelligence, because this is not a conventional warfare. This is something that every one of us should be actively involved, because it's only when you supply intelligence that we can work with. We've never seen this kind of thing before. I was sharing experience, some of my experience with a couple of people. I told them, listen, Nigerian armed forces went to Sierra Leone and they excelled. Despite the terrain, despite the nature of the environment, they were able to perform. They went to Liberia with the kind of enemies we have around the environment. Nigerian armed forces, along with ECOMOG, excelled. You've seen Nigerian armed forces also, or if the police or whatever it is, go to other foreign countries. You find them, they put off sterling performance. And you ask yourself, why is this happening here? We need to also understand these are human beings. And at this point, I must commend the Nigerian Armed Forces. It's not easy for us that are in this studio here. We're sitting in the comfort of these air conditions. You have these chaps, the boots on the ground, all over the whole theater war, at the front of theater war. They don't sleep, they don't do anything in order to protect us. So we've got to show some level of understanding. I know everybody is really concerned, but is the leadership in this country on top of this? That I cannot say. But Nigerians are simply not happy because of the way things are happening.
Right,
and things have got to be put a lot better than the way it's being done.
Right, and briefly, would you say that the reason Nigerian security forces have performed well internationally is not only because they are operating within an international environment with other international security forces, and therefore there's greater pressure on them to perform, but that also they are better looked after in those environments, because often it's under either ECOMOG or the UN or something like that.
Exactly, that's the point. The condition of services,
yes,
what comes to them is better. The environment they operate is much more better than what you have here. In this environment, in most cases, we've had situations where they have no ammunitions, they have no to go to war front and all that, all the big part that goes on within behind.
Right.
And all that. So there are so many factors that are responsible for why they have.
Well, let me just bring you in, Dr. Adamu. We've got about 40 seconds before we have to take a break, but I'll come straight back to you. What information is emerging about what is going on in Niger State? I know you touched on that briefly, with Boko Haram apparently taking control and hoisting its flags in Kaure and Shiroro. Just to be clear on what is actually going on there, has there been any clarity about what's going on?
Lack of clarity is one big issue. The use of the term unknown gunmen is unfortunately in the lexicon of Nigerian discourse at the moment.
But there seem to be gunmen.
They are gunmen, and they are, as it were, unknown, and that's the thing. But like I said, if you look into the archives, there are indicators of who these unknown gunmen are. I mentioned that there were Ansaru.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll come straight back to you and we'll finish that thought. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the deteriorating security situation in Nigeria. A popular Catholic priest who used to be an ally of President Buhari has called on him to resign, and the presidency has hit back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyekola. Now, a popular Catholic priest in southeast Nigeria has defended his controversial remarks asking President Muhammadu Buhari to resign over the deteriorating security situation in Nigeria. Father Ejike Mbaka also criticized a government official who'd said his remarks were ungodly. The priest had previously expressed his support for the president, and Mr. Buhari had even shared a picture of them together at the presidential villa in Abuja. On Friday, a presidential spokesman, Garba Shehu, questioned Father Mbaka's motives, saying it was because he had failed to get government contracts. The spokesman made his claims in a post on Twitter, which Father Mbaka has termed as laughable and childish. And with me, the security and defense analyst, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, who's also CEO of the security firm Beacon Consulting, and the national chairman of the Nigerian Inter-Party Advisory Council, Dr. Leonard Ezenwa. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with us. And let me come back to you, Dr. Adamu, to finish your thoughts. We're talking about whether this could be bandits carrying out attacks in the name of Boko Haram in Niger State, or does this revelation by the governor of the state, who you'd think would have some intelligence on security in his state, suggest that there are some links between the two, or some conflation of the activities between the two?
Definitely. I was talking about the so-called unknown gunmen and the fact that they are active in almost all the forests in the northwest, north central, and to an extent the northeast Nigeria. Now, Niger, given its landmass and the presence of some of these ungoverned spaces, the forest, means, of course, it has its own fair share of these unknown gunmen. Now, until there is a formal claim by any of these groups for their activities, we would have to use indicators. And some of the indicators suggest, for instance, that there are these bandits, then there are the terrorists, especially Ansaru. There is enough evidence to indicate that there are active Ansaru cells in Niger. Now, we also know that in the last few months, starting from 2020, there has been an attempt by these terrorist groups to bring into their fold the bandits. And so, especially if we see what is happening in Kaduna, I will not be surprised if there are active bandit groups that have sort of accepted or pledged allegiance to one or two of the terrorist groups that are operating in the northeast. Now, whether that allegiance is for strategic purposes, so I'll give you an example. All over the Sahel, and in fact, most parts of the world, there are instances where terrorist groups incorporate the helps of criminal groups to carry out certain activities. So as an example, kidnap for ransom. It's well documented. These terrorist groups would use the criminal groups to carry out kidnap for ransom, and then they lead in the negotiation. So the proceeds of the negotiation would now be shared between the two groups. Then there are also instances where the weaponry, especially the gun running channels of the two groups, the criminals and the terrorists, is one and the same. But because the terrorists have more access to the weaponry, they now arm these criminal groups to carry out their activities. So it's very likely that this is playing out in Niger State.
Very interesting. And let's move now to the southeast and the Father Mbaka debacle, as well as the state of lawlessness that appears to be growing down there. The governors in several states appearing to be in a state of siege with the separatist group IPOB and their armed wing ESN. What is your sense of what is going on there before we get to talk of Father Mbaka briefly?
I think we had a meeting I think last 2 weeks, and we looked at this very closely. What is coming out is bottle up disaffection. People are not happy. And the way they are ventilating this, the way they're expressing this is what is playing out. Now, the Southeast, likely has been a very peaceful environment compared to other parts of the country.
Up to this point.
Yes, up to this point. And so, with the urgency, with the way the whole thing came up, the people are a little bit confused. First of all, the peace-loving people of Southeast who have not experienced this kind of lifestyle are beginning to see how are they going to adjust and all that. I think what is playing out in the Southeast is basically apprehension, fear, and how do we deal with this particular issue. But the other thing is we need to also understand there are underlying reasons why these things take place. We tend to talk about insecurity always and always and always. What is fueling insecurity? What are those germane, silent, very important factors that are responsible for why people are disenchanted, why people are not happy with things that are going on? The group IPOP or whatever, by whatever name, whether it is even in the Northwest, in the North, whatever it is, people are beginning to see that, look, things are not working the way it should work, and people are expressing in various ways. And so in the Southeast, I tell you, it's not going to be the same thing again. And to live in this kind of lifestyle is something they are adjusting with. And it's a big one, a big problem for both the Southeasterners and people that come around that very place. As I speak with you now, I got the call that the banks likely most of the banks are closing, or they closed their businesses early on account of...
That is in the Southeast?
Yes, in the Southeast. And these are purely business, commercial people. So virtually all facets of their lives have been impacted and all that. So we are praying quickly that this will just come to an end, so the people of that region can just begin their life away and the way they are beginning to do.
Absolutely, because the point is that the longer it lasts, the more intractable the situation will become, and the harder it will be to get people to compromise, and as they become more entrenched in their positions. And of course that threat of violence affects everything, including businesses. I mean, let me bring you in, Dr. Adamu, because, I mean, your expertise is across the whole of West Africa, including the Sahel, but, north, south, east, west of Nigeria. How complex would you say the situation is in the Southeast? Because there's a mixture of politics and insecurity, as well as deep mistrust of the state governments there. Does that deepen the complexity of the situation?
Exactly. One of the root causes of insecurity in Nigeria is the perception and the reality of marginalization. And in no part of the country is this more obvious than in the Southeast, unfortunately. Now, a lot of it can be addressed politically. And I mean, we're lucky to have a politician in our midst, and I think this burden really is on the shoulder of politicians. How do they address this perception and the reality of marginalization? And unfortunately, and I hate to be the harbinger of bad news, as we approach 2023, this the manifestation of that perception would grow wider. Now, again, it's only a political measure, platform that would address this perception and the reality of marginalization. Am I seeing that being done? Unfortunately, not enough of it. So engagement is the way to go. Now, that platform would allow law enforcement to do its work. Currently, because the political side has not provided that platform, it's very difficult and almost impossible for law enforcement to do its work. We speak about intelligence, we speak about acceptance, the wide gap between the law enforcement and residents. All these are realities, but none of this would be corrected if politics does not do its work, and that's, I think, the way to go.
Okay.
Speaking about that, the National Assembly, the state assemblies have a huge responsibility, and then the state governments and the more or less moribund local governments.
Okay, let me bring you in, Dr. Ezenwa, there briefly, because we've got. I mean, we're going to talk about Father Mbaka, and you were saying that one of the reasons why he's reacting the way he is that he can feel the mood of his constituents, I mean, his congregants in church and so on. What do you make of those controversial remarks that he's asking President Buhari to resign, and just, literally a year ago, he was clapping for President Buhari?
Just as you did,
We've got about a minute.
Yes,
Sorry.
I would just, you said, first of all, Father Mbaka is a human being. Secondly, he has congregants, as you just point, and he feels the pulse of these people. And most times they also get across to him continually on exactly what is happening. So as a pastor, as a priest, essentially will respond in that light. But what I have always said is that clerics should do as much as possible to not get themselves involved in politics, because in our environment, it's very dirty. And it's very dirty because we tend to have gotten shaped up to a kind of politics of acrimonious living.
And obviously it tarnishes their image.
Exactly.
I mean, because there's talk of him asking the presidency for contracts, and this is coming from the presidency, so it's not tittle-tattle.
But we are not in a position to, to say exactly what happened. We can't be able to, substantiate that particular claim from the presidency. But the point we're making is this: let clergymen try as much as possible to distance themselves from politics. I know they are human beings. They feel the pulse of their congregants. They should as much as possible because of the kind of politics we practice in the environment. Don't also forget the congregants belong to different political tendencies. Right. And so, even if you make this statement, maybe somebody from one other political party or the other.
Well, let me put it this way. It's a money bags democracy, and it's a money bags religion. Some might dispute that, but that's up to them. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Kabiru Adamu and Dr. Leonard Ezenwa. Thank you ever so much. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including, after much philanthropy and global giving involving billions of dollars, the sad news that Bill and Melinda Gates are going their separate ways. Stay with us.